This webinar will be recorded and posted on our YouTube page if you want to refer back to it or forward it on to anybody who was not able to attend this morning. So today's webinar is going to be a little bit of a hybrid. Originally, we scheduled this about a month ago thinking that there would be some emerging trends, maybe some new businesses that we see, entrepreneurs, that type of stuff. And we realized yesterday that it's still a little too early. So it's going to be just like a little bit of hybrid of what's going on real world in our offices. There were a couple of questions that came out of the webinar last week regarding like CDC regulations, kitchenettes, how we handle those high touch points, throughout the day with the employees, like real world things going back into the office. So for my office, I've got Kathy Humm, who's our director of HR, Black, who is our vice president, to just talk about what we're doing in the office. So to give you some background, we have 250 employees throughout our corporation. We've got 80 or so in the office on a regular basis. And we have the third and fourth floor of our building, just to give you a context of our office. And we also want to touch a little bit about what's going on in the site, since we've had field crews out on the site through this entire thing. And then Kelly and Kim are going to go over things that they're doing within their offices and also what they're doing for their clients. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the panel. And Kathy, if you want to start out with what we're seeing and how we're going to implement our employees coming back to the office, and then we can just have a broader conversation with our designers and with Omar to talk about what's going on in the field.
Sure. So I think I'd like to start with, we really need to be mindful as we bring people back to work. There's a lot of fears and anxiety about the coronavirus, and we essentially launched into a 2-month telework, in some cases full-time telework, and for people to acclimate from telework
Kathy.
Flexible when we're looking at opening our offices. Harkins has drafted a office reopen protocol, and similar to the legislation, we are doing it in a 3-stage approach. The first stage will be coordinating with your lead, your division department lead, on staggered work. And the staggered work, 50% or less in your department division, will take place in stage 2. And then little by little through stage 2, we'll roll into stage 3, which will be back to as normal of a workplace as possible. Again, I can't focus enough on the fact that we really need to be flexible. Everyone thinks differently about this. Kristen, you may think that, this is great, we can go back to work. Someone else may have fear of, getting the virus at the office. So everybody thinks differently, so we just need to be sensitive to that. For Harkins, we're doing a lot of internal stuff to be prepared for the workforce re-entering. We're looking at automated sinks and plexiglass barriers, things of that nature that will be touch-free or create that 6 feet of social distancing to prevent the spread of the virus. We're also looking at an electronic visitors log and badging system that includes questionnaires, a questionnaire for our visitors. Have you been in touch with someone that has the coronavirus? There's a couple questions that we'll ask. And the last thing that we're doing with our visitors is we are installing a thermal temperature camera in our lobby in Columbia and our Wayne, Pennsylvania office, where it can collect, it can screen up to a dozen people that walk in, their temperatures, and if anyone has over 100.4, we will be sending them home. The same applies for our employees. They're going to be doing self-monitoring before they come to work. They have to enter the 4th floor where the camera will be set up. And if they too have flu-like symptoms, 100.4 fever or more, we will be sending them home and following the protocol we have been since this started. Some other things that we're going to be doing is we're going to do a deep clean of the office before we reopen. We will be creating one-way traffic patterns, particularly in the cafe. I think it's going to be hard to, we talked about, should we have one person in the cafe? And as Omar and Kristen know, our office space is very open. So we're gonna rely a little bit on our employees to just monitor that 6 feet of distance, have a traffic pattern on the floor, and if somebody's at the coffee area, stand back, 6 feet or more until they're done and kind of follow that flow. A lot of signs. Tracy, our office manager, is going to be putting up a lot of signs: wash your hands regularly, practice 6 feet of social distancing, those kinds of things, and face coverings. Our employees will be required to wear face coverings anywhere in the office, with the exception of their workstation. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. As we roll this out, we are sensitive to ADA and some of the HR regulations that exist and some that have been modified through the coronavirus. So looking at our workforce coming back and giving reasonable accommodations to those that possibly are high risk, and maybe even looking at cases on an individual basis, depending on their situation through this health pandemic.
Awesome, thanks. Omar, do you want to talk a little bit about our project sites and what's been going on in the field and how that's changed as far as, inspections and owner walkthroughs?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Kathy kind of touched on it a little bit, where she was emphasizing a little bit of flexibility, and we've been trying to live through this. Every project is a little bit different, just depending on what type of project it is and where it is and what we're doing at certain different times. In the beginning, when we were trying to figure this out, everybody's having a hard time trying to adhere to the social distance measures. So we actually recruited a group of individuals from within the company to go out and act as marshals on the sites and go and just walk around and make sure everybody was staying the proper distance apart, which, depending on construction activities, is hard to do sometimes. It takes two guys to lift a sheet of drywall. You can't do it by yourself. So, also understanding that, in the beginning, trying to understand where there's exceptions are. We moved on from there and kind of backed off of that and put more of the onus on the trade partners in terms of, hey, give us your activity hazard plan. Let's look at it. Let's talk about how you're going to do some of this work. In terms of things similar to the office, some project sites have monitoring where trade partners go through a gate and get their temperature checked. Some don't. It really depends on how big the job is and what stage the job's in. We also have some clients where we're doing some tenant in place renovation work where that has basically come to a halt, and each client's a little bit different in terms of what the protocols are going to be going back into those projects. And a lot of them, a lot of those clients have taken the initiative in terms of reaching out to industrial hygienists or health professionals or anything like that to help us work together in terms of, getting a plan to go back into this occupied building. Something that has really, I think this is going to change the way we do construction going in the future that has really emerged through all this is virtual inspections. Some jurisdictions are a little bit ahead of the game. Some are a little bit behind the game. In Arlington County, everybody's pretty much doing it right now, where we have a iPad or a 360-degree camera, and we're walking an inspector through the unit or the space that we're getting inspected, and they're writing a ticket and taking a picture of it and signing it off and sending that text or email or electronic communication of that sign off, and it's really made a lot of things go smoother in terms of, you know, close-ins, fire inspections, which are notoriously some of the more difficult ones. The fire inspectors have been really helpful with this, and even a little bit with elevator inspectors, who are notoriously difficult as well. So that's something that I kind of see that's going to stick around in some way, shape, or form when we get out of this. That's going to really help improve the efficiency of our projects. And, you know, that's just an example of that. And you know, the owners that are writing the protocols for working in an occupied place. You know, in my career, I don't ever remember seeing a time where we have the owner, developer clients, we have the contractor, we have the banks, we have the jurisdictions that we're working all aligned to a common goal of how we're going to get through this. And that's been a kind of a, you know, refreshing one, but two, it's if we can continue this momentum of goodwill, I think it's going to be very productive for all parties in the future.
Great. It is nice to see that cohesiveness of trying to move forward and get on a digital platform that we can all work together for sure. Kim and Kelly, what are you seeing? I know, Kim, we had talked a little bit about like just your office and going into your office and the touch points on the materials, that sort of stuff. And then, you know, what you're doing with your clients. And Kelly, you know, feel free to just have an open conversation about those things.
So, you know, to go into my office in particular, we have to get through several doors. We're in the city, so we have to get through several doors, get into an elevator or a stairwell. So we're definitely implementing the same that everybody else is, you know, trying to find ways. We're an old building, we don't have touch-free, so that's an issue. We think going forward, everything's going to be touch-free as much as possible. I'm reading about elevators now. You'll walk into an elevator and you'll say 4th floor and it'll take you there without having to touch buttons. So I think we're going to get to that. In the meantime, you know, we've looked at the, I don't know what they're called. They're like little key fobs. They look kind of like the little thing, like a beer bottle opener that someone has on a keychain, you know, that you use to touch anything.
It's called a cootie key.
Is that what it is? That's
a cootie key.
Yep. That's it. So I think people are going to be using those. There's going to be hand sanitizers at every location. So that's how we're dealing with it in the interim. When you get onto the elevator, when you get off the elevator. We're also installing plexiglass in our office between workstations as a temporary fix, hopefully. But the bottom line is things aren't going to return to normal until this is done. And I just heard this morning on the Today Show that this could mutate into something different. This virus could change, and it might be a year, 2 years before it goes away, or we find a vaccine for it. So I think this is like a long-term thing that we're just going to evolve into. I think what we're seeing is people are going to work from home a lot more. It's going to be more intentional to go into the office. It's not going to be an automatic thing. We've learned that we can do this. Here we all are having a meeting, a conversation without having to get in our cars and drive. We're saving the environment in some ways by not constantly commuting. So what we can get done at home, we're going to get done at home, and then we're going to go into the office. Other things I'm hearing are people are missing things like face-to-face meetings. And I know Kelly and I talked about this yesterday, actually, the face-to-face meeting thing, but they're saying like the 2 minutes that you have before a meeting starts, or the 5 minutes after a meeting where you actually have a conversation with a coworker. I know we're all missing that kind of stuff. And that's harder to do on a Zoom call. As far as like the kitchen kind of things that Kathy kind of touched on, the workplace, everyday things, I think getting in and out of a refrigerator is something we're talking about. That's going to be a constant germ fest. So we are recommending to our employees that we bring our own insulated lunch bags and not store everything in the refrigerator like we used to. I'm trying to think of there's so much. there's just so much.
I might just add, because a couple of things you touched on with the space. We had a seminar with our landlord. So make sure you're in communication with your landlord of your building. One thing that Howard Hughes for our building is going to provide is an elevator operator during 7 to 4 typical working hours to ensure that people are minding their distance, only a few people in the elevator at a time. I think that's important for people to reach out to their landlords to find out, what are you doing to help us reintegrate back into the workspace? And you'll find that they're going to be more accommodating in this situation than ever before, because they certainly don't want to lose your business.
I thought another interesting point that you mentioned yesterday was shutting down our stairwells. I mean, not shutting them down, obviously, for fire access, but not allowing the employees, because you want everybody to come to the 4th floor to be screened. And I guess, I mean, because you are in HR and I can ask you this, how is it, I mean, how do you turn employees away, or how do you turn subcontractors away? And if they get upset, they want to work, have to work, like how are we prepared to handle that?
We've been dealing with this, particularly in the field, since the start of the health pandemic, where you know, if someone has flu-like symptoms or a fever is the big indicator of potential COVID-19, we've asked them to go home for 72 hours until their last symptom without the aid of medication, and we've asked them to seek medical consultation. And we really have not had any issues, because people don't want to get this, people don't want to spread it, and I would have to say across the board, we haven't had any issues where they said no or why.
Yeah, I agree with that, Kathy. Everybody's in this together, and they're treating it that way.
That's actually,
in most cases, they've reached out to their medical primary care physician, and in a lot of cases, they've gotten tested, whether it's positive or negative. And then what we do is, and we'll do this in the office setting and continue to do it on site, is if there are 6 symptoms, Harkins looks back 72 hours from when those 6 symptoms started to try to understand who that person was in contact with, where they worked, and that will help us determine, do we need to quarantine those people for a period of time? Do we need to sanitize an area of work? Potentially, in some cases, we've had to shut our jobs down and done a deep cleaning because the individual was in multiple places on site. So same applies for the office. If we have somebody that's been in a lot of areas and they test positive, we will shut down the office for a period of time, do a deep clean, and then reopen.
Gotcha. Candace, I'm gonna unmute you if I can. You had a question about inspections. You wanna go ahead and ask that?
Oh yeah, I was just, when we were talking about the virtual inspection option, I was just wondering how that was gonna, or how it has impacted the cost of the inspection reports, whether that is higher or lower.
No, you're still paying the same when you get your permit, which most jurisdictions, the inspection costs are built into the permit. There's not any break on that. It's just more of, there's a break on the site team, you know, potentially missing the inspector. They tend to come at certain times. I'm going to be there between 11 and 12. And if you're not there, tough, you got to reschedule. It's just been, for us, it's been purely an efficiency impact.
Okay. I guess I'm thinking maybe even one step further, because I'm on the lending side. So I'm thinking of projects where, we've already settled on and they are doing things, in stages, and then we'll send out an inspector just to make sure, that a certain amount of things have been done so that they can get their next advance. I would assume that would be, virtual inspections would qualify for something like that as well.
Yeah, so one thing that I'm kind of exploring right now would be is we haven't had a virtual inspection with a bank inspector yet, which first question would when will banks start being open to that idea? The second is, okay, what's another way we can get this done? And, everybody knows about drone capability, and we have the capability with technology to take drone pictures and overlay them with our site plans and stuff like that. So that would be typically in the beginning phase of a project when you're doing all your site work. You could theoretically fly your drone, overlay it with your site plan. You could see how much work was put into place that way. Another way would be once you start getting into units or buildings, start taking that 360-degree camera and creating files that you transmit, and then have the inspector look at it that way. I haven't figured those things out yet, but those are some ideas that we're all talking about.
Thanks.
Sorry, I have noise outside of my house. Kathleen, I'm going to unmute you. You had an idea, and then Kat, you are next.
Hi, everyone. So I was just thinking, I've heard of some people who have put small tissues, similar to like when you're at a bagel shop or something, you grab that little tissue and then you pull it out of the case. So I've heard of people putting like a tissue on a stand near the elevator buttons, and you grab it, and that's how you press the button, and then you throw it away in the little bin. Is that something that's being considered? To me, it seems like a lot of extra product, but it also then, eliminates another touch point a little bit more. Would that work for like the refrigerators rather than completely eliminating refrigerators in a workplace? Would something like that, that's a small barrier, or potentially even having a procedure where you have to wash your hands before you touch the refrigerator door handle, something like that? Is that something you heard of, and do you see that happening anywhere else?
I've actually seen on a webinar where there is this box with toothpicks in the elevator, and you take the toothpick one out and you push the number for your floor. And then we were kind of joking. We're like, okay, then what do you do with the toothpick? You just kind of hold it and you have to wait until you get to a trash can to throw it out. But similar concept. That's actually a really good idea to have the tissues right by the refrigerator. A couple of things, and I will pass that on to our office manager, but we're going to give constant reminders to wash your hands at all times. That's key. And that the CDC has always said that if you wash your hands and you stay, clean, your hands stay clean, you have a better chance of not getting the virus. We are providing every employee a kit when they return on their desk. So it's going to have masks, it's going to have cleaning supplies, paper towels, all of the things that they need so that they can make sure their space is clean. And I would assume that Tracy will be putting that in the cafe where you can have those paper towels and spray to clean regularly. We are also hiring a site sanitizer for our office to go around and wipe every high touch point area all day long.
That's great.
I'm learning so much about my own company right now. Kat, go ahead.
Sure. Good morning. My question is in regards to building entry. If people are, only a few people are allowed on the elevator at once, then you're going to have, I would assume, a buildup in the lobby. So what's that going to look like? Have companies figured out, are people going to stand 6 feet apart? Is there a plan for that? Will that line back up then to the door? I'm just curious what that looks like.
Frankly, I think it's going to be a wait and see. That first few days are going to be hectic. Mm-hmm. Our workforce is going to be no more than 50% capacity when we start. And maybe after the first day or two, we get comments that say, it's not working coming at 8. And then, so then we may shift, okay, you start at 9. If somebody wants to start earlier, you start at 7, and start to shift the work start time so that we can eliminate the backup. But I would assume that Howard Hughes is going to have, you know, little stickers on the floor that say, you know, that measure out the 6 feet, and possibly would go out the you know, outside until you can get on the elevator.
Yeah. And then I have one more question that Laura Penza actually asked, I think at the end of ours last week, and we didn't get answered. This is more applicable now, I think. She wondered about the coffee stations in kitchens. Are companies gonna get rid of that altogether, do you think? Or like you said, it's just wash your hands and give each other 6 feet?
Well, for us, that site sanitizer that we're hiring to wipe down everything, that will be one of the focus points. The kitchen area, continually, you know, constantly going in there and wiping down the hand, because we have the Keurigs where you have to lift up and you have to actually touch it. So that will be a focus. All the main common areas will be a focus for this person.
Thank you.
Oh, right. Kelly, we haven't heard from you yet. So Kelly, I know you're meeting with clients. You had a client meeting yesterday about re-entry and redesign and what you're seeing. So take it away. Kelly, we cannot hear you.
How about now?
Yep.
Okay. So we're not seeing that space is going to grow nor shrink across the board, simply because the one-to-one ratio is not going to change, regardless if it's a staged entry, as Kathy was talking about, 50% capacity. The bottom line from a safety standpoint is, if your space is already planned to be, you know, within 6-foot increments, which the majority of our clients their workstations or offices are already that far apart, I can tell you I'm not sharing my workstation at 50% capacity in order to address any sort of work from home program. Oftentimes in work from home structured programs, there's a shared desk scenario. That's going to go away simply from a safety standpoint. You don't know who was there before you, and you don't know who's coming after you. And, you know, my desk is a mess. You know, I need my stuff. So, you know, you're not going to see this massive, you know, 50% reduction on real estate, or this everything's going to double. I think the most important thing in all of this is, what is the safety strategy, the cleaning strategy, and everything that Kathy has been talking about is the most critical thing in order to keep your people, their performance up, and, you know, make people feel safe. Productivity is one thing, but you can still be a high producer and not be a high performer. And I think a lot of that is coming from a structured process and from safety. So that's what we're seeing across the board. And we don't have any clients actually doing much with their space at all. It's more of a re-entry kind of stuff like Kathy was talking about. But we don't have any of our clients retrofitting or doing anything with their spaces. So.
Sorry, Kim, go ahead. Are you seeing redesigns?
Yes, we have already been working with clients to prep them in getting ready to have their employees come back to the workforce. One client in particular, we've done multiple offices already, so they're already that's already in the works. Things like barriers, furniture design, things like that will help from day one when their employees come back. And we have a COVID-19 task force that's been working for the past 8 weeks, collecting data and feeding that to our clients so that, you know, they can be prepared with everything they can in advance. So we are seeing that prep work. Some people are not thinking of it, but a lot of them are. I was in a space the other day where someone's taking a lot of existing space over and expanding, and their existing space happens to have very large offices and very large workstations. And I'm like, lucky you, because everybody else is going to be shrinking and you're already moving into a space that's good to go. My best friend lives in Switzerland, and so I asked her a couple weeks ago, because they're in advance of us with this pandemic, what they're doing. They're starting to return back to school, and they're starting to return back to work a little bit. And she said that they just went through a whole redesign of their space to activity-based work settings, and they were all, moving forward in that direction. And they received an email saying, you're going to go to work and you're going to pick a station, and that's going to be your spot. So, these concepts of activity-based workstations may be a thing of the past, unless, like Kathy is saying, unless there's constant controls of cleaning along the way. So that will be a big change. Also, the collaboration spaces that we've been seeing, for the past couple of years, have been doing a lot of collaboration that's more living room, lounge furniture, that kind of stuff. That's probably going to change. Large meetings is another thing that's going to change. We're not going to be, I don't see us walking into an enclosed conference room and having 10 people sitting elbow to elbow. It'll be more standing or, wide open space meetings, or just Skype meetings from your desk. So I think that's going to be something to get used to in the future. That's really different than what we've been dealing with.
What did
you say?
That makes me sad.
It does. You know what? It's going to evolve, and who knows where it will go. But then there's the psychology of it as well. People are depressed by this situation, like you're saying. So I think that's going to make changes too, from simple things like color, and I envision the grays are going away, and I've read that, especially in cities, it'll be more of greens and life and that kind of stuff. Those kind of colors will come back. And there'll just be a different, like, bright and vibrant colors will resurge and things like that. I think, there's a psychology to all this, because we're not used to this.
Yeah, I think that's actually an interesting point, Kim, because there are color theorists who actually give us, in the interior design world, once a year. They come in and they give you the color forecast as as presented by the fashion industry in Milan, and it happens over this really fascinating 1 or 2 week time frame where it's all about color forecasting, and it has a direct relationship to the economy. And it's really a fascinating history from the standpoint of how people implement color and why they implement color. And I think that the green piece is really interesting, the color green, not the sustainability green, even though that does have a tie in it, is what are soothing colors that will make people feel safe, right? And I think you're gonna see a lot of that come out of the color forecasting in the next couple of years, because it was already kind of going that way anyway. Maybe the word wasn't safety, but comfort was a big word that we were hearing over the last year in color forecasting. And I think also from the psychology piece of it is people need people. I mentioned this on our call yesterday. People need people. We need to see people, we need to touch, we need to hear, we need to feel people around us. The tasting is a little weird. That's a little, off the beaten path, but it's a full sensory experience when you have other people around you. And we need that, as a species to survive. This is cool and this is great. Technology doesn't always work. And, I miss people, and I know I'm not the only one. And I think that's a really important thing as we're thinking about what the office does for us as people, because it gives us a place to form relationships, and it gives us a place to experience other people's, I wouldn't know half the people on this call if I didn't, build up some sort of relationship in person, with you all and for the people that I know. And I think that's a really important piece that can't be overlooked in the reentry, which is phase 1, and then phase 2 through 10. How are we on the design side gonna, help shepherd that level of safety, and what does that experience look like? And that's where we're spending a bulk of our time from a research standpoint, is what does that experience look and feel like, not only on day 1, but day 10 as well. And I think that's a really important thing. And I'm just as much of a germaphobe as anybody else. And at Verve, we're lucky. We started in my basement, so we were virtual from day 1, and we never looked back. We also we have 8 people, and they have a choice of how they want to come back into the office with certain protocols that we've already set. But I miss people.
Candace, you had another question about construction delays. Do you want to address that?
Yeah, so I was just wondering, we were talking earlier about the construction projects, but scanning people on site and potentially sending home. So in the cases where it ends up being a large group of people, like what we're seeing at the airports and stuff, how would that impact things? Like, would you hire on potentially temp employees to keep that project going, or would you, stop for a few days, which could turn into a few weeks? It's a multi-part question, just kind of, wondering like how we should prepare for, the timing of construction projects going forward. And then also, if that could, potentially be a good, area where people could look for jobs that are looking for work on a temp basis.
So right now within Harkins Builders across the board, we're probably operating in terms of production 75 to 80% efficiency, with all the people that are becoming sick and having to leave. So we've recognized that, and we've also made a conscious decision at the leadership level to prioritize safety over production. Mm-hmm. That's how it's going to be for the foreseeable future. Our council is telling us that this is a force majeure issue, that we will work out some way, shape, or form with a lot of our clients. Some of that's going to be determined. We don't know how yet. In terms of trying to get temporary labor to fill those positions that are empty due to someone being sick, I don't really see that as a viable option at this point. And it kind of goes back to a longer term problem that we've had in this market area in the Mid-Atlantic, in that when the recession hit in 2008, we had a lot of labor just get up and either leave the industry or leave this area. And that pool has really shrunk. And, Candace, being that you're in the banking business, you've probably seen some of this pricing increase that is a lot to do with the labor shortage that we have. So that labor isn't necessarily there in this market to just tap and be able to go to. I'm a little surprised. The question, if I were in your position, I think I'd ask Candace is, you start taking some of those things, people getting sick, jobs getting slower, maybe there's less jobs. When does that translate into lower pricing across the board, which we have not started to see yet at Harkins Builders. And we've got our finger on the pulse. We're going out to subcontractors and trade partners, gosh, on 30 some projects between the last 2 weeks and the next 6 weeks or whatever. Right now our clients are not pulling deals off the tables, but they are pressing pause, or jurisdiction in which they're working in is delaying it because they're trying to figure out the same things we're trying to figure out, which is, how do you do what you used to do in person when you can't be in person? So, it's guessing there a little bit in terms of cost, but right now it's a status quo.
And I'd like to add that it's kind of putting a jigsaw puzzle together. We have projects that have been shut down for a period of time. For example, tenant in place work in our renovation division. So we have put those people on what we call the bench. And every day we look at who's on that bench and who can we shift to another project that may had a COVID-19 positive case, or we had quarantined a number of people there. And we do that on a daily basis. We're trying to shift around people. We have people in commercial working in multifamily. I mean, it just is what it is, and we're trying to maximize everyone's ability to contribute depending on where the need is. And I have to say, people have been pretty flexible in doing that, and even, you know, if it means driving a distance to help out on a job. It's been quite remarkable, I have to say, and I would assume in your businesses as well, that what I've seen at Harkins and with our trade partners and clients, that everybody's pulling together on this, and it's just pretty incredible to see that we're all in this together and we're all willing to do whatever we have to do to make it work.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking on, you know, on the front end, that where we would normally maybe say 12, 24 months, you know, completion time, that now that might need to be, we might not need to start thinking of adjusting our terms as far as that goes.
Yes, I would definitely think that. And I've already had some of those discussions with some of our clients saying, hey, you know, what do you want to do here? Do you want to build a little extra time in? Do you not want to build extra time in? And, you know, what I've been finding is that everybody's got a different response, but they've all really appreciated the fact that you're taking that step and communicating that fact.
I've, you know, talked to a lot of people over the past, you know, 2 weeks, just trying to drum up business and figure out, you know, I mean, project opportunities. And for Kim and Kelly and some of our other designers, I have heard, and you can, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, that the projects that they did hit pause on are starting to come back. Like our clients, the phone's starting to ring again, which was great news for me, which, you know, because my business is going to follow that trend. So are you seeing the finger come off the pause button as far as office, you know, renovations and?
Yeah, I think it's a slow, I mean, it's a slow pause. Coming off slightly, it's not going to be a flood. I think it's people need, it goes back to that comfort level. I don't know about you, Kim.
We've continued, you know, to be able to do work, but, you know, most recently it's getting harder because people are not, like Omar said, not allowed on sites or whatever. The buildings are closed, or clients are choosing not to open right now. So it makes it hard for, like, for example, I had a project, I needed an acoustical specialist to come in and check something so we knew how to design this space, and he's not allowed on site to do his work. And that's not something you can do. He can do remotely. He needs to be at the space with the equipment. So that's kind of putting a hold on that project. So that's where we're seeing kind of like, you know, we get to a certain point of design and then we just have to halt until some things change and things start reopening.
Yeah, us too. It's very similar.
All right, I'm going to go back up to a question from Colleen, and it was about morale for everybody. She said, and Colleen, I see you now. I can take you off of mute. There you go.
Yeah, I have to remember what I wrote. It was more ethereal. I know we were talking about a lot of actions that we're implementing into our offices, like the masks or barriers. But what is everybody doing about right now in terms of like low morale? You know, we have a really, really close, tight-knit office. And every Monday morning we do these team meetings. And I'm like, how was everyone's weekend? And all peppy. And everyone just kind of grumbles. They're like, stop asking, really. Because we didn't go anywhere. So it's just, if anyone has any suggestions of how they're dealing with morale in their offices,
Employee.
I'd love to hear about it.
I might actually, you know, I'm going to pick on Kelsey a little bit. Kelsey's our chapter administrator with Charm City Concierge, and Sherry is here as well. What are you guys doing? You know, they run the concierge services in the buildings. What are you guys doing for tenant engagement, employee engagement?
Well, Kelsey helps to put this program together, which I always talk about every Tuesday, coffee and conversation with the crew members, because to me, this is exactly what we want to try to implement with the employees, whether it's a company or the landlord, with your tenants. And as much as we look forward to getting together, people do still, they crave that connection. And we know when we go back, whenever we go back, we're going to be 6 feet apart or whatever, but we still want to be connected. So that's one of the things at Charm that we're working on. We're putting programs that are like the hybrid now. It's like we have to look at business in the new normal, which is if half of the workers are at home and half are in the company, how can you still feel connected as a whole company? So the programs that we're putting in place, I'll just give you one fun example, like Cinco de Mayo. We had a landlord send out to their tenants the point of contact of each company that was in their building, and they sent them a care package of the margarita mix, some nachos, and they had an invitation to say, meet us for a happy hour today. Let's celebrate Cinco de Mayo. So it's those ways of kind of crafting and customizing what your companies, what your workforce, that's what we're working with, whether it's individual companies with the landlords of how to create that new normal. But as far as the morale, I'm somewhat new with Charm. I started in February, so right before all this happened. And I have to give credit, Kelsey's a part of like helping to create this as well. But every single morning we come together at 9 for a huddle. And we go State of the Union, what's happening in the business, but the takeaways, and I think it's helped with our morale, is that we share what we're grateful for at the end. We do a little, we've brought in meditation, we've done some yoga. We just implement a few of those things. Maybe it's a couple of times a week, but having that program, it kind of just keeps us all human and we get to share, but yet we still have a takeaway. So, that's exactly, no matter what business you're in, that's what we're helping people do right now. We're putting together a forecast, just like we would do our yearly plan. We're now doing it. What does the new normal look like, and helping with that? Same with the vendors. I heard some of you talking about supplies. We are looking at all of our vendors that we use for events or what have you, but we're making sure that they submit to us their COVID guidelines so that we can help be a part of the process when it comes to, from what I'm hearing, people aren't going to really be able to go to their favorite restaurant during lunchtime because the building's not going to want people to go back and forth, or the companies are going to want you to stay put in one area, if you will, bring your food in. So we're working very closely with whether it's PPE supplies or if it's the caterer of who to come in, so we can help orchestrate that process. Not that we're going to be the police of everybody coming in and out, but we can help kind of guide with the vendors that we have. So as far as the morale, little yoga, little meditation, or a Cinco de Mayo, a margarita, like we're doing with Crew. It's really, I'm enjoying these. So thank you for, everybody, just sharing it. It's always so informative and it's a great experience.
I think too, to piggyback on what Sherry said, it's trial and error, nobody knows the right way, the wrong way to handle everything that's going on. So listen to your employees, listen to your tenants, listen to what people want. You might try something and realize that people aren't engaged, so you kind of jump onto the next thing and see what works there. Really just a lot of trial and error and just testing things out and see what works, see what gets people excited, and kind of carry on from there.
Awesome. I do love that we've got a lot of business owners on this call. Teresa, small A's, can you tell me about bingo?
Sure. So what we did, and I actually copied this from, my husband works for Johnson & Johnson, and their regional team put together a bingo card with language that was pertinent to that call. So for me, we were going over you know, different strategies of who was doing what. So let's say I had a square on the bingo card with collections, and another was customer reminders. So I made up bingo cards for all my employees. I sent those out to them. And then during the call, they had to essentially listen for the term and could mark off their bingo sheet. And then we had multiple bingo winners. So that added a little excitement. You know, everyone loves to call out in the middle of a conversation bingo. And everyone got Amazon gift cards, and who's not ordering off of Amazon now. We also did when it was one of the ladies in our office, it was her 70th birthday. So I thought as a little fun surprise, without her knowing about it, everyone dressed up for the conference call and sang happy birthday to her. And we had a cake shipped out to her. So just trying to make things a little special. It helps. It adds some laughs to the call and keeps things interesting.
Awesome, thank you. All right, well, we have a few minutes left. Are there any other questions? You guys can wave at the screen. You can put it in the chat. And any of our panelists, any last thoughts, words of advice?
I have a few things to share that I didn't mention yet. When talking about changes in finishes, we are thinking there might be a resurgence of copper and brass and bronze because of the antimicrobial properties, you know, that germs will dissipate in less time than on other finishes. So maybe knobs and handles and all that stuff will change. Another thing that we didn't talk about is, you know, especially for if you're in the city, there's a need for bike storage for people that used to take public transportation to work that might have a fear of doing that, might need another alternative means to get to work if it's not within walking distance. So that's another thing space-wise that we might need to accommodate.
I would agree for visitors as well. I know when I have meetings in the city, I ride my bike, and there is no place to put my bike, which is crazy.
True. And I think also, you know, there's a lot of simple things as furniture solutions that we can do right off the bat. I see Wendy Cassini on the call. She's at Price Modern. She can, I'm sure, has 1,000 options there to help our clients. But the last thing is kind of to piggyback on what Kelly mentioned earlier about the size of the offices probably not changing. I totally agree with her on that. Because what's happening is, as the workstations grow, we're all of a sudden now we can't have 5-foot corridors anymore like we used to. They're gonna have to be like 7-foot corridors. So we're gonna be designing accordingly. So, you know, that's good news for us. For us, commercial designers, commercial contractors, and the real estate owners. So that's it. I think we'll get through this. It's all just, we're all in it together, and we're all kind of guessing and learning as we go.
Definitely a crystal ball situation.
For
all
sure.
Right. Kathleen, you wanted to mention, you're gonna have to, there you go.
Yeah, so my company's actually, we've found a protective coating that you put on surfaces after you disinfect it. So you clean it, you disinfect it, and then you apply this protective coating, and it supposedly lasts for 30 days on the surface. It's clear, it doesn't leave a residue, but what it does is it limits the amount of time the virus can live on the surface. So if it's something like a metal where typically that surface will, you know, allow the virus to live on it for whatever the standard amount is. I believe it's like 48 hours on metal, right? So it cuts that time down considerably so that you have a better chance between disinfecting. So you come through and disinfect on a regular basis. Kathy, you talked about the site sanitizer. As that person goes around, people will be touching the surfaces in between. So we're actually in the testing stages of it now to make sure that it actually does what it says it's supposed to do. But if you apply this on the high touch surfaces, then you have a better chance in between the cleanings. So that's another layer that we're adding into our clients' programs as well, once we see that it's effective.
There's an emerging trend coming out of this, and then of course, you know what Omar was talking about in our virtual inspections and stuff. So, all right, any Kelly or Kathy? All good?
I just want to say that several of you have touched on the well-being of the individual and the workforce coming back. It's so critical. Stress, anxiety, fear. We're going to be rolling out some seminars, 45-minute, hour-long seminars on all of these topics. I know for me, you know, working at home, which is not customary, healthy eating habits, sleep. I know I've heard several have had an uptick in drinking. So just all of these things that we need to be mindful of as we come back to the workforce, and having more and more individual touches, kudos, spot bonus. We have $100 spot bonuses. Some people have converted those to door dashes because it makes sense in this environment, but just being mindful of that as we move forward.
Yeah, that's great. All right, well, we've got, we're coming up on our hour. So next week, our 9:30 program is going to be yoga. It's going to be yoga for a cause. We are still looking to drum up foundation. So Crew Network, our foundation, provides scholarships to women in commercial real estate. So we're still trying to drum up money for our scholarship funds and our most needed funds through our foundation. So next week's going to be Yoga for a Cause. We're asking for a $10 donation, which will be put in your name. That will go directly to your foundation donation. And so that'll be Tuesday at noon, I believe. Kelsey's shaking her head. Yes, I got that right. So yeah, so Tuesday at noon, and then we'll continue on with our 9:30 program after in through June. So I want to thank everybody. Thank you so much for our panelists for being here. And with that, enjoy the rest of your day.